If you're a Japanese car enthusiast and you love new releases or just a car fanatic in general, you'll know about these two big car releases this year, the GR86 and the 400z. These are cars that people are going to love across the world for JDM goodness or just general sports cars, and I'm going to go and talk about the pros and cons of each car. We're going to talk about the comparisons, and there's a really interesting stuff that you might not know about, such as the petrol ban, as well as prices and availability of where the car is going to be sold. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'm Cars with Ben. Kicking off with this video, I'm going to start with the design of each car. I love both cars' design because they're so unique and different from each other. They look amazing, and you can tell each manufacturer spent a very long time trying to get all the lines right, especially in the 400z, and that's where I'm going to start. I have to be honest, the 400z for me is probably the better looking car just because it's really retro. A lot of people in the forums are saying how well it is looking back to the older cars, the older Zs, specifically the 240Z, which I mentioned in the last video, and it's really got that old design. It looks excellent and it has such a aggressive but really subtle look. The back end looks great, the front looks great. Every angle of this car is designed from its older predecessors. As for the GR86, well, I think that looks awesome as well. It does look a little bit more curved than the old GT86, and it does have a bit more of a slanting back than in the predecessor, and I still prefer this look. However, I do think it looks a little bit more softer now with the GR86. It does look great in some angles, but others I just don't like the way it looks because it's just too soft, as you can see from this comparison here. However, that doesn't mean it's terrible, but my problem with this is it doesn't look as retro, or it's not really harping back to the days of the older cars, and that's what a lot of people have said in the forums. People prefer the 400z in terms of its design over the GR86. However, I'm sure the body of the GR86 is very well engineered to be going around corners at very high speeds, so both have their ups and downs. Up next is performance, and this is a really important category. Both of these cars are sports cars, and they're going to have great performance. I'm not talking about supercar level or anything necessarily faster or a little bit slower. I'm talking about the sports car level, and this is where they're going to be the most fun for the most people, as most people probably will leave them stock. The 400Z is packing about 400 horsepower and a V6 engine, and supposedly you can reach a top speed of 160. You can really tell that they've gone full out on this because it's a bit more beefier in its engine, and it's got quite a serious bit of kit underneath, given that Nissan really wanted to go all out because it could be one of their last Cs. Who knows? With the Nissan, I actually really like how big it is in terms of its market, but that's because it's only available in America and Japan. So not really coming to Europe, so maybe they went for that engine for a reason. For the GT86/BRZ, it has actually been up this time to a 2.4 litre engine. Still a boxer, by the way, and that means it's going to be a bit more powerful than the GT86 or the older BRZ, with a 0 to 62 in 6.3 seconds. Now, both will be excellent, I'm sure, but I think the GR86 and BRZ will handle better, given that it's a bit lighter and it's got that power that's probably still producing just over 200 to 230 horsepower. So it's still going to have a very similar engine compared to its predecessor, which is good because the old car was still great, and I don't think they should really change that. I think it just needed a little bit more power, but it doesn't look like it's going to be enough to keep up maybe with a 400Z. Moving on to interior, because this is going to play a very important role because it all comes with a lot of goodies for both cars. The 400Z's interior for me is very, very nice. They've revamped it completely, and it has similarities to the 370Z, but it will be, of course, a lot better. They have obviously got a bigger screen for display and booster gauges, as well as a really cool two-tone interior, which I think is a really nice touch for all the options. For the GR86, it's very similar to the GT86, which is fine. That was a great interior, and I've got a GT86, so I can definitely say that is great. It's got a bigger display screen, which I think is needed, but my disappointment is where it does have the Toyota badge on the steering wheel. It should be GR or 86. It's not really displaying what the speciality of the car is, and for me that was really important. There's not enough sort of badging there, whereas the Z has a lot more Zs around the interior. However, I actually think the old 86 interior was better, but that's just my opinion. It's worth noting that while the 400Z now only has 2 seats, the GR86 will still have a 4-seater layout, so that depends if you still need that space. Both cars' cargo capacities is actually really generous, and they still have this pretty much similar spaces. The Z, of course, has that big bar which is where the chassis and structure sort of sits for the suspension, as with the old cars. But that shouldn't matter too much. You should be able to get a weekend away, a lot of groceries, a lot of food, a lot of extra DIY bits you might need. Okay, moving on to price, because I think this is going to be a major denominator for a lot of people buying these cars. Now, I will say the price difference between the two is actually quite a small amount, but one is obviously more expensive than the other, and that one is the 400Z. Straight away, the 400Z is about $40,000, maybe 45 if you were to spec it up a bit. Now, these are varying costs that obviously the car hasn't been fully released yet, so we haven't seen the full spec list, but it probably could get a bit more. I just want to say straight off the bat that that is an incredible value for what is an amazing car, compared to maybe its competitors, such as the Mustang, or maybe older supercars or sports cars that might have a little bit more power, and they couldn't really price it higher than a GTR anyway, which is probably about 60,000. So Nissan really are pricing their cars very well, and you can kind of see what it would take to buy a current gen GTR. So the $45,000 to $40,000 mark is pretty good. For the GR86, we are talking around £29,000, and I've said pounds and dollars there for a reason. And the reason is because the GR86 is a lot cheaper, but I think that's because they couldn't spec it more than what it was worth given the engine size and performance. It's similar to the old GT86 and maybe competitors for the Mazda MX-5 or the BRZ, of course. Now, that is incredible value from Toyota given their cars are excellent and everyone loves them, so we'll see what happens with those prices. Finally, a really important decider for a lot of people will, of course, be its availability and how will you get this car, or where is it going to? Well, with the 400Z, it's a limited market. It's only going to North America, Japan, and potentially Australia. And that's really unfortunate because a lot of Europe will love the 400Z. A lot of Nissans have come to the UK. A lot of people had to import them, and it's probably going to be the same here. It doesn't mean it's better or worse for that, but I just think it's going to be rarer and harder to get hold of. And major letdown from Nissan not bringing it to Europe. But it is a bigger car. For the GR86, however, that will be sold worldwide as the GT86 was, and was very popular for it. So well done to Toyota selling it to the new markets that they know will work. But it is a bit of a smaller car, so just a bit more economical. So maybe we'll get different versions of the GR86 and the Nismo for the 400Z. Who knows? But I really look forward to seeing what they do with these future cars. Hope you've enjoyed this Cars with Ben video. Don't forget to subscribe if you like car content.